Morning, Dad.
Hey, going for a run?
Yeah, you should join me like you used to.
Not with my old knees and back.
Try Xanthicin. It could really help. Plus, it's super safe, Dad, and it's good for your heart and brain.
Xanthicin fights aging with astaxanthin, nature's most powerful antioxidant. And with 3 times the absorption and superior purity, it's the brand physicians trust. Find it at getxantho.com and these retailers. Keep doing what you love with Xanthicin.
All right, how's it going, everybody? It is episode 45 here on Hawaii Football Now, presented by Xanthicin. Jordan Headley, Hunter Hughes back with you on our first episode of July, basically. We record this Tuesday morning, about 7:22 Hawaii time, 10:22 Vegas time, as I am up on the continent. Hunter is back home, but modern technology, we can do this thing basically from anywhere. Big shout out to our other sponsors, Spectrum Mobile and Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union as well. Set to release this on July 7th, Thursday. And with the way things are moving right now, you think back to last Thursday and the tectonic massive news that came about with UCLA and USC. I thought it was probably a fake tweet when I saw it Thursday morning. But there is a lot to talk about here in today's episode. We go guestless in large part because the impact all the way down to programs like Hawaii could be monumental. So we'll get to that in just a second. It's been round the clock news. I've been checking Twitter all the time. It's like, what's going to happen? And so you need a little bit of extra energy, don't you, Hunter? You need a little bit of something from our good friends over at Xanthicin.
Oh, yeah, big time. You need something to get you going. And I don't know, Jordan, have you heard about this amazing supplement called astaxanthin? Doctors and pharmacists recommend it from everything from joint and muscle function to cholesterol health and cognitive function, even anti-aging. But did you know that only one brand delivers 3 times more astaxanthin to your body, making it a better buy than the competition? Introducing Xanthicin, available at getxantho.com, Newtown Square Pharmacy, Down to Earth Kaka'ako, GNC stores, and Pharmacare Hawaii. Learn more at getxantho.com. And man, you're right, man. I need to pop a couple pills of Xanthicin after what's gone down, man. It's just chaos right now.
Absolute chaos. Little quick opening drive. I'm in Vegas. I wasn't here in time for the fights. I got in on Sunday, so didn't get to kind of catch the crowd, at least kind of the crowd that stayed for the long weekend, but missed out on, obviously it was a little bit of a rough go for Brad Tavares and, of course, Max Holloway on the UFC card. But, you do hear a little bit of the buzz of the conference realignment in college football. It's interesting because Vegas is such a transient town. It's obviously grown into quite the sports city with the Raiders moving here, with the rise of the Golden Knights, obviously, and shout out to them. Had to get my hat when in Rome. The Aviators, their AAA team is outdrawing their major league affiliate in the A's. There are, rumors of the A's maybe moving here. And then, of course, UNLV, right, which has always been a strong basketball showing from the Running Rebels. Football has always been a little bit lagging behind, right? But now with everything shifting around, you hear the murmurings, right? It's like, hey, we're Vegas, we're growing, we're a huge sports market now. Are they appealing enough to get the call up, if you will, into the big leagues with everything shuffling around? And of course, I got to imagine a lot of those similar conversations going on back home. You see it on Twitter. You've seen it for years, right? Hawaii, where do they end up? What's their ultimate home? The pipe dreams of the Pac-12 and all kinds of things like that. But that's what we kind of want to get into in depth here today. But just kind of starting at the top as we dive into our game time here again, as we mentioned, like tectonic shifts in college football. You've got the Los Angeles schools, UCLA and USC, storied programs in a number of sports. Obviously, all of this is football driven.
Yeah.
There's no question about it, right? It killed the Big East when a few years back. It has created situations where Rutgers is in the Big Ten, and some of these other schools that don't really make a whole lot of sense, of now UCF going to the Big 12. And now this is the one that I think is sort of the huge detonation, right? Yeah. Everything could sort of still under the veil of regionality when it came to things, right? Even Texas A&M going to the SEC, that was still a border state to the SEC footprint. Missouri as well. West Virginia kind of finding its way into the Big 12. Nebraska, Rutgers, Maryland over the time, getting into the Big 10. A little bit of a stretch. You know, the ACC obviously spanning from Pittsburgh to Syracuse to Tallahassee and Miami. Kind of far flung, but okay, it's sort of regional there. Yeah. The one conference that had sort of, I think, made the most sense still from a geographic standpoint was the Pac-12. Yeah. I thought that was the one, right? I know they added the mountain schools in Utah and Colorado, but it really sort of seemed to be the one conference that was, you know, that made a lot of sense. But they were also the conference that was lagging behind the other Power Four in terms of revenue, in terms of TV deals and all of that. And so now this is all money driven. We know that. And quite honestly, as a fan of college football, this sucks. Like UCLA and USC are opting to go play their nearest conference opponent in Lincoln, Nebraska. Like it doesn't make any sense. It makes all the sense when you look at it from a business standpoint, but just kind of curious, Hunter, some of your initial reactions when you saw this news last week, Thursday. Yeah,
other than, earlier this year, the news coming out about Oklahoma and Texas jumping into the SEC and essentially, some would argue this point, kind of making the Big 12 obsolete. This is by far the biggest conference news jumpers, from that standpoint. And I immediately think to, because my family all lives in Oklahoma, two of my siblings went to OU. If Lincoln Riley knew that this was in the plans whenever he jumped from OU to USC, because literally not 6 months into his regime as head coach at USC is this move now taking place. It's interesting, man, because now when you think about it, okay, what is the Pac-12? Outside of Oregon and maybe a few other, I would say, sub-tier teams, it's kind of a weaker Power 5 conference now. Not even kind of, it really is. Because when I would think of the Pac-12, immediately I would think of USC, their dominance in the early 2000s, and then those years with Mariota at Oregon. And outside of that, I'm just speaking from my upbringing in the Midwest and what the Pac-12 meant to me growing up. Now I live in Hawaii. It's much different global worldview, I guess, with their significance out here. But it's going to change the landscape of college football as we know it. I mean, who knows who's going to jump in, who's jumping out, what's going to happen from here?
Yeah, and it's really truly the first national conference, right? When you look at it, you go from the shores of Maryland and from Piscataway all the way to Los Angeles. And, it's this gigantic, massive footprint, right? And we have seen other leagues attempt to kind of do this, right? But never a power conference where it's literally spanning, all three time zones on the continent. Well, all four time zones, I should say, on the continent, where it's literally spanning geography-wise 3,500 miles, right? And so the Big East thought about it, right? They were going to add Boise. They were going to add San Diego State. Yeah. Never actually happened. They figured a way out of there, and the Mountain West kind of solidified and absorbed some of those WAC schools, including Hawaii. You think back to the old WAC when it was a 16-team behemoth. That only lasted, I think, 4 years in the 90s, right? Great conference, by the way. Yeah, great conference, especially in basketball. Man, that was a good conference. But I mean, everywhere from Hawaii all the way to the central time zone, basically. And again, that was too big. It was too big. It didn't make sense. They had to get creative. They had to get unique scheduling wise in terms of creating quadrants and scheduling and travel and all of that. And, for 8 of those schools, they said, the heck with it. We're going to create our own conference, and thus the Mountain West, in 99 or whatever it was. And Hawaii was on the outside looking in there with the WAC kind of, with their pants down. And so it's all about the money. It's so funny because we're heading toward 2, maybe 3 super duper conferences. Like the Big Ten the SEC and whoever can survive along with them.
Yeah.
And all the indications over the last few years have been right. The Power Five just continues to widen the gulf between the group of five, the haves, the have-nots,
Yeah.
as June Jones would put it. And this just expedites that timeline. You're looking at, I think, a group of schools, whether it's right, the Big Ten is going to get to what here, about 15, 16. The SEC is at a similar number. They can both get to 20 easily, maybe 24. You're looking at 40, 48 schools that probably will break away from the NCAA. If I had to put money on it, they're going to say, forget it. We're going to create our own rules. All of a sudden, there aren't scholarship limits that you're beholden to that is set by the NCAA. You can scoop up maybe perhaps more prospects. Maybe it's 100 instead of 85 when it comes to scholarship limits. They'll figure out a way, right? And again, if they're autonomous, they're not playing under, not that they've really been playing under the same rules as, say, a Hawaii or a Boise State or an East Carolina or something like that. They'll be the ones making the rules, you know? And so I don't love it at all. I think it's terrible I think it makes, you know, for a fan, right? If you're a UCLA, a USC fan, if your closest conference game is Lincoln, Nebraska, that's not as exciting as going up to the Bay Area once a year to go play either Cal or Stanford, or going up to Seattle or Eugene or something like that to some familiar faces. And look, it'll create new travel opportunities, whatever. That's fine and dandy. But again, we're just talking about football. I've kind of tabled the conversation here on what this means for, you know, the women's track team or the baseball team or something like that. Like it's
polo.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And so this is just another domino, I think, that sends us toward there. How do the other conferences sort of scrap and hold on? Does the Pac-12 exist, you know, come 2024 when this move is scheduled to take place? Obviously, USC and UCLA are scheduled to be there for the 2022 season, the 2023 season. This has ramifications. UCLA is on Hawaii's schedule 3 more times over the next, 8 years, I think it is, for the football program. Do those games happen? I don't know. We'll get down to that here in a second. But, it's basically heading towards semi-professional athletics, and I'm not against the NIL stuff. It's so funny what people get so worked up about these athletes getting paid a little bit. And look, the schools are making money hand over fist, and we've got 2 Los Angeles schools going to the Big Ten here and basically signing up willingly for Hawaii's travel schedule. When they didn't need to. But that's all it is. And so if these kids are making a little bit of money, I'm all for it. But we're heading towards 2 regional conferences, whether it's the North and the South. And then we got rid of divisions this year because it's going to help you get into the playoff and things like that. They're still going to have to create divisions or pseudo divisions to handle scheduling, right? And so you're going to have a Big Ten that's got 24 teams. You're going to make 4 6-team little quadrants. You're going to find ways to make schedule. You're just back to divisions. And then the SEC is going to have to do the same thing. And you know what that is? It's just the NFL.
Yeah.
That's all it is, right? It's a little slightly bigger version of the NFL. And all these schools are just going to play each other. They're going to make oodles of money. People are going to be jaded, but they're still going to tune in. I'm still going to tune in. I'm jaded, but I'm still going to watch the television contracts. And that's all that matters now are these television deals. It doesn't necessarily matter about TV markets or anything like that. It is all about Fox is driving the Big Ten, ESPN is driving the SEC, and they're brokering these deals as much as anybody involved. And the schools are going to make tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars from these next TV contracts that are coming up in the next handful of years. Yeah. And we're going to be left with a organization, some sort of confederation of roughly 40, 50 teams that could care less about Hawaii and Boise and some of these others. And maybe some of those schools can fight and claw their way in, right? Like a Houston, like Cincinnati, some of these schools that have done it. But Hawaii's not in that tier. I mean, just frankly. And so just to me, any way you look at it, the fact that it's 100% greed and money driven, it sucks. I think this is terrible for college football. And again, we're just talking about football. I can get into some of the other stuff here, but it's just every way you look at it, it's to borrow the kind of the local term, right? It's just uji. Like it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. This is terrible to me.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. So I grew up in Chicago, Jordan, where Big Ten was king. And for the most part, the Big Ten is a Midwest conference. The majority of the schools line up kind of right there in Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Indiana. Obviously, Indiana's on Eastern, and Michigan is right above there too, Ohio, but kind of centrally located right there around the Great Lakes. And now you hit it perfect. I mean, you've got a continental shift now where they are the full span of our country. Very, very unique. I as much as yes, this is shaking up what the future of college sports looks like. I do want to play a little bit of devil's advocate where you still have the opportunity for a school like Hawaii. If we strike gold, and that's the beauty of just lacing it up, is this is a possibility. And we run the table, we go 13-0, and these super conferences eat each other. And you've got a bunch of, 11-1, 10-2 teams out there. There is still a possibility of getting an invitation to the big dance, just like what we saw with Cincinnati this last year. Because some would say, yes, strength of schedule is not there, but the wins and losses is king when looking at bids to the college football playoff. So I'm even thinking of implications for the Pac-12 now. Schools like Oregon, Washington State, Arizona, all those guys, they still have an opportunity. If they ball out, they could be in the college football playoff, no doubt about it, especially with being a Power 5 school. It's not the end, but it looks like, wow, I'm gonna have to go back to school again just to figure out what all of this means in terms of what that means for college football and just the future of the sport as we know it. I'm glad for the sake of the players out there that they are getting representation for the first time. For those listening at home, college football players especially usually go through about a 80 to 90 hour work week in terms of what is mandatory work hours. And the old model of doing scholarships and taking care of your room and your board and stuff like that absolutely needed to change. And here we are in the new era of name, image, and likeness. But with schools now kind of adopting this, well, if we're not getting the fair shake that we want to, we're just going to jump ship. What we're seeing with college athletes, schools are literally doing that right now. We're not getting the fair shake in the Pac-12. Let's try our luck at the Big Ten. That's essentially what's happening right here, Jordan.
Yeah, yes, exactly, right. And people get bent out of shape about the transfer portal and player empowerment and player movement. I agree with you. Look, the coaches and the schools and everybody in positions of power that are making tens of millions of dollars, they've been doing this for a while now and continue to do it, right? And that's the other thing. Everybody will, the statements put out, right, by USC leadership, UCLA leadership, they always quote, and the same thing last week. We are always going to put our school and our student athletes in the best position possible for their success, for their collegiate experience and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it's not about that, right? Yeah. It's a bunch of hogwash.
Yeah.
You're
trying to get paid, bro. Just say it.
It's a bunch of hogwash. Look, and they can get high and mighty about their U.S. News and World Report ranking when it comes to university rankings. You can talk about the Big Ten and its academic prestige, right? Those were kind of the two conferences, the Big Ten and the Pac-12, that still kind of held on to that, right? And where their schools rank. And we care about those type of things, right? From the university presidents on down. If you're looking for the best possible situation for your student athletes, you're not making your school in Los Angeles go play conference games 1,400 miles away in the snow.
Yeah.
And again, for football, all right, look, they're flying chartered flights, right? They live in the good life. Men's basketball to an extent as well. But as you point out in the snow, look, the women's basketball program, the women's volleyball programs. Look, they get the one road game at USC or at UCLA, but other than that, you got to get on a multi-hour flight.
That's right.
And they're talking about getting creative, right? Getting creative with scheduling to help out with the student athletes. So what does that mean? You're going to be gone for 3 weeks touring the Midwest because you want to
neutral sites? Are they
yeah,
going to be
what does that mean? They're going to be missing infinitely more school, more class time. And look, yeah, okay, we can do everything via Zoom now and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's great. It's not ideal. It's not like sitting in class. It's not like sitting in the lecture hall talking to your professor, whatever. We've been through it. Like, yeah, you can get it done. Is it the fullest academic experience you can offer these student athletes? Heck no, not even close. If they're constantly on the road,
campus walkthrough doesn't hold as much merit now, because when am I ever on campus?
When are you ever on campus?
On the road half the year.
You're gonna be on the road. Exactly. You are a minor league baseball player riding the bus,
Big
right?
time.
For months at a time. And especially, like you point out, some of the, like basketball in particular, it's in the heart of winter.
Yes.
You're traveling to Madison and State College, Pennsylvania. And again, they're not going to play all of these schools every single year. We get it. But again, you got to get creative with all the scheduling, and then it's just going to be silly. You're going to get gimmicky in how you do it. That's the only way to make this work. And so it's just a nightmare. The Pac-12, I think the Larry Scott era was a nightmare, and they set themselves up for kind of this lack of success. You talk about the playoff. It's kind of interesting. There was opportunities for automatic bids that came up in recent years, right? The Pac-12 always voted against it. Boy, would they love to have an automatic bid now in the future playoffs, right? I think it was ESPN approached them about some sort of merger with the Big 12. They scoffed at that. Now they may be desperately asking the Big 12 to figure something out to keep those two conferences alive. But the other interesting aspect with all this, and I thought it was prudent for you to bring it up, Hunter, the college football playoff. And I wasn't really aware of this until, kind of reading up in the last week and listening to some other podcasts and some talking heads. I had forgotten the college football playoff contract expires after 2025. So these schools are moving in 2024, right? Oklahoma.
We get an 8-team playoff, Jordan?
Well, Oklahoma, right? They're moving. And so that maybe, right? An optimistic look is an 18 playoff or a 12-team playoff. No automatic bids. It's 90% populated by Big Ten SEC teams, but maybe there's an avenue in there for somebody else, right? That swoop in, whether it's Clemson or whether it's, Oregon, or whether it is indeed somebody like a Cincinnati. But the other thing here, if the SEC leadership, the Big Ten leadership, whoever they can scoop up over the next couple of years, get together, why wouldn't they just create their own playoff? Right? And tell everybody else, figure out your own deal. Right?
Big
it's not run by the NCAA.
SEC.
Yeah. It'll be the Big Ten versus SEC, Super Bowl. Right? It's the AFL versus the NFL back in the day. And everybody else gets peanuts.
Playoff already is, right? Is
in a sense,
Ohio State against Bama.
Right. And if the SEC and the Big Ten are like, look, nobody else can hold a candle to us. We've got 9 of the best 12 teams in the country. We'll just make our own playoff. We'll keep all the money. Nobody else. We don't have to share the money with any of the other conferences. We don't have to share it with the other schools that get New Year's 6 automatic bids. We don't have to share it with the Cincinnati who crashes the party and the AAC, the American, and give that conference some money. Why wouldn't we just make our own little deal? We'll take 4 of our teams, our top 4 teams from the Big Ten, our top 4 teams from the SEC, maybe play a little quarterfinal round or something, then get the 2 semifinals together someplace, and then we'll rotate it between Indianapolis, Tampa, Atlanta, and Chicago every year or something like that, and they'll create their own.
We saw it with UCF. You don't like what happened, you can just get your governor to say, yeah, you won the national championship. So
right. And so what's to stop them from doing that and icing everybody else out? More money. That's the best way to maximize. They'll get the TV dollars. They'll figure something out. And so that's the scary part to me, right? Because maybe I'm just way too pessimistic here. And so how that all works out, I don't know. I really don't know. And again, I think back to some of these other sports and how football is the king to everything. It drives everything financially. We know that. But it really has been the worst thing for college athletics as a whole. Because again, it has forced conferences into a illogical geographic layout, right? Where most of these schools, right, as you point out, the Midwest, that was the beauty of the Big Ten.
Yeah.
You could go from Iowa City to Chicago to Madison to Minneapolis and as far away as, Indiana, Ohio. And yeah, they added Penn State, right, in the last few decades, and State College, Pennsylvania, which wasn't too bad. But for the most part, you can drive.
Notre Dame would play those schools.
Right, in Notre Dame, right, in that footprint. And who knows what happens to them, right, where their home is. If I was them, I'd kind of get off the whole independence high horse and just jump in with the Big Ten. And
it makes the most sense.
It doesn't make sense for them to do anything else to me. Pac-12, same thing, or Pac-10 for all those years, right? It was a West Coast conference. Basically every major market on the West Coast made a lot of sense. Easy to get to, a lot of similarities, a lot of commonalities. The SEC to an extent, same way, right? Whether it was the Big 8 and the Big 12, whether it was the SEC, the Southwest Conference, all these things, those made sense beyond football, right? The Big East, the Northeast Conference that was, mainly basketball oriented in Madison Square Garden for their Big East tournament.
So fun.
Oh man, my favorite event every single year.
Yeah.
And why did it go away? Football. They got the conference got a little excited, started adding football playing schools. All of a sudden you gotta get in the mix there. Football caused all of these conference realignments and whatever iteration you want to look at, going back to Miami and Virginia Tech jumping over to the ACC early 2000s. And next thing you know, the conference is bigger. The footprint is bigger. All of a sudden the road trips are longer. And again, for football, peanuts, right? You got 6 road trips a year. But for any of the non-rev sports, even some of the higher profile men's, women's basketball, women's volleyball, something like that, even that, and not easy road trips. And so it's just, I love football and college football. Still, if it's a Saturday night, it's a big game, I'm tuning in. But it is really over the last, 30 years, just kind of led us down this path of more and more money. But I think from a fan standpoint, just less and less from a fulfilling standpoint.
Yeah, man, it's kind of sad. It's hard to get excited about all of this because you can't help but start to play the hypothetical. Okay, what else is going to happen now after this? I mean, with the departure of USC and UCLA, you got to think the Pac-12 is going to be looking to fill those voids with some other schools. And with regards to location and prowess, if you will, like my first 2 bids right off the bat are Boise and San Diego State to jump over to the Pac-12, just in terms of market value and their success on the field, which has immediate implications to us in the Mountain West. So I don't know, Jordan, do you think that could be a realistic possibility with the departure of these 2 schools?
It's on the table. I think it's definitely on the table. I think, it depends too, right? Who else gets swooped up? Does Oregon and Washington eventually make their way over to the Big Ten? Like has been rumored. That door seems to be closed for now. That doesn't mean anything, right? I think they are angling as much as anybody within that conference to find a solid hold, right? Especially Oregon with the Nike background, with Phil Knight's influence.
Big time.
He's not going to want to play in a minor league. That's for sure. But the next closest home now all of a sudden is either the SEC or the Big Ten. It doesn't make any sense, but that's kind of where we're at, right? And so can the Big Ten and the Big 12, the Pac-12 work something out, right? I think that's probably the ideal case for both of those conferences, right? Some sort of merging, some sort of melding of those 2 conferences. Or does the Big 12 kind of, kick the Pac-12 while it's down, say the heck with that? We're going to take Utah, Colorado, Arizona State and leave you with your 6 schools and you figure it out up in the Northwest, right? We're fine here. We're going to be a lot more stable with those 4 schools. That could happen, right? They could get cannibalized in that sense.
Yeah.
Other than a mutual sort of agreement to merge, for the Pac-12, it's been rumored they're looking at expansion candidates, and if really outside of the Big 12, that only means, I think, two things that I've kind of read about, right? Which is Mountain West schools.
Yeah.
There ain't nobody else on the West Coast.
That's right.
Mountain West schools, or some sort of old Big East model where you welcome in non-football playing schools and supplement with some football playing schools on the other end, right? Gonzaga, St. Mary's, some of those West Coast Conference schools have been rumored as well, at least as a area of discussion, an area of exploration. Thought that was kind of interesting, right? You welcome those schools in. Maybe it's a football only invite for Boise State or for San Diego State or something like that, right? Kind of what we saw in the old Big East. And I will be quick to point out, it didn't really work for a long period of time in the Big East. That kind of crumbled right away. But as of now, the Pac-12 is absolutely desperate in trying to figure out what they're going to do going forward. And so naturally that leads to the conversation, right? And maybe we can broach on this here. We're kind of due for the halftime break, but for Hawaii, where does Hawaii fit in all of this? And I get it. We've talked a lot at length about college football at large, about the Pac-12, the Big Ten, kind of broader. Well, not necessarily getting to UH here, but what does that mean, right? I mean, you saw the tweets. People have been talking about this even before all of the crazy shifts, but like Hawaii to the Pac-12. Could it happen? Could it ever happen?
Yeah.
Probably not. Right? I'm not going to say never because that's what it is, but there's a huge impact on future schedules. We mentioned with UCLA, there's other Pac-12 teams that are scheduled to play Hawaii in coming years. And where does Hawaii fit in the landscape? What do the conferences look like? Do any of these future non-conference opponents or games come to fruition? Because so much could change. Look, a lot of these contracts are contracts. You can buy your way out, especially for these big schools. That's not the hardest thing to do. It's happened in recent years for Hawaii. And so that's going to be the big question. So I'll tell you what, we'll take a quick break and then we'll get into the second half here, Hunter. We've already gone, I think, like half an hour. So we could go for about 4 hours here today, I think. But before we get there, do want to kind of remind everybody that, some other topics we'll get to, some of the recruiting news, a flip of a commitment from what we thought was a Hawaii bound player, number one offensive tackle, Mauigoa, also made his commitment just yesterday. As we record this on Tuesday, he made the commitment on Monday. Hawaii was in his top 6. So we'll get to that here in just a second. But before we hit the halftime break, as Hawaii's largest federal credit union, Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union is committed to serving individuals and businesses through its 14 branch locations, statewide and convenient digital banking services. As a leader in providing support for the islands, Hawaii USA is committed to strengthening Hawaii's financial wellness and sharing successes with members, local businesses, and the greater community. Originally opened in 1936 as a credit union for educators, Hawaii USA has inspired a culture of giving that is rooted in education and has since expanded to other areas of community need that impact financial health. That includes healthcare, housing, and hunger. To learn more, please visit hawaiiusafcu.com. All right, second half coming up.
This is Hawaii Football Now from ESPN Honolulu.
All right, second half time here on episode 45. Jordan Hunter back with you. Obviously, the big topic of conversation, conference realignment, USC, UCLA to the Big Ten, where that leaves everybody. And now specifically, where does that leave Hawaii, right? Yeah. The Mountain West could get raided, right? Maybe the Big 12 goes after some. Maybe the Pac-12 goes after a few others. Is Hawaii in consideration for any of that? Hard to imagine at this point. The stadium situation does not help, obviously. There are some who are eternally optimistic that say, hey, look, gateway to Asia, decent sized market in Honolulu, direct flights to basically every major West Coast city and even beyond, right? With the reach that you can get to Chicago, you can get to Newark, you can get to Orlando, Austin, Texas, Dallas, Houston, direct from Honolulu. So there are pathways there. Hawaii looks, those, hey, they're going to build a new stadium in Halava. Maybe. Yeah. There are signs to point to like, hey, this is a program that could be on par, at least with some of the other resumes put forth by Mountain West brethren to get into some of these bigger conferences. the pessimistic side, I think, maybe the more realistic side, the stadium situation is not getting resolved anytime soon. That's a real hard sell. You know, if you're playing in a 12,000 seat or whatever we're going to get it up to this year, you know, in future years, even if they expand at Ching, even if they build something permanent there in Ching, that's years off. If they figure out a scenario in Halava to build the new Aloha Stadium with that whole new Aloha Stadium entertainment district, that's years off, right? And as we've learned, years can mean 18 different shifts at this point. You know, by 2030, whenever they get any of this figured out, we might be playing in the spring because that's the only time that like June has been sort of profiting for years. The group of five should just break off, go play in the spring, create their own television deal and say forget it, and create their own division basically, and leave the big boys to have their own fun in the fall.
Yeah.
Look, there are only so many seats at the table. How many seats there are, I don't know what that landscape looks like. You know, as you point out, maybe even staying in the Mountain West, solidifying that leads a pathway to the New Year's Six or to the playoff as these other programs cannibalize each other in bigger conferences now. Because look, for USC, UCLA, for an Ohio State, that's the other interesting thing, right? It's look, the path to an undefeated season is ridiculously hard now in these conferences. And so for Hawaii, maybe there's an opportunity to kind of, you know, draft a little bit and sneak in there or something.
Yeah.
I think no matter which way you look at it, it's deeply concerning for Hawaii. And look, opportunities change, maybe present now different ways to look at things, maybe present opportunities, new doors open. Hawaii can figure out a way, you know, getting into the Mountain West and the Big West about what now? A decade ago, I thought was a pretty good landing spot, all things considered, with the way the WAC was crumbling to find a home for all of its athletic programs. I think the Big West has been a good home for the non-football playing programs. Obviously, the Mountain West, the travel subsidies that came with those moves aren't ideal, but look, there weren't a whole lot of other options at the time. And I think for Hawaii, all things considered, pretty good landing spot. I gave them, you know, the administration credit there. It's going to take something similar again here. And I just don't know where that home is. It makes me really nervous as a Hawaii football fan. I wish I could say that, look, there's a clear-cut answer. There's a logical next landing spot for Hawaii. I just don't know what that is. I can't really tell you. And that makes me very uneasy for a program that has been building momentum. We've talked about that at length here on this podcast. But right now, the future is murky and it's scary.
Yeah, no, to say the least. I think it's very unique timing for University of Hawaii and the state of Hawaii, where, I mean, it's no secret. Everyone that lives in Hawaii jokes that it takes us 10 years to build anything out here. Even the Manoa Public Library in my backyard, Jordan. Okay. I moved out here in 2010. That thing was first finished, I think, in like 2019 or something like that, like officially opened in like 2019. Okay. And it's highlighting, the reason I'm bringing this up is our inability to play ball infrastructure wise, making movement, you know, shaking things up, and making things happen in the city really shows that in some ways we can't compete at the national level with, you know, we need a new stadium, boom, it's fixed, like on the mainland. Like it happens fast at these new schools. $20 million, boom, signed. Where's the pen? Like it's not that simple over here in Hawaii. And we kind of have to, that's just the nature of doing life out here. You kind of have to roll with the punches and get creative with how you do things. We don't have as much land. We don't have as much resources, blah, 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 blah. Well, now when we're talking about college athletics and things of that nature, where other schools seem to be moving and it seems like we're having trouble just getting back on our feet with everything that's happened the last couple of years. You're exactly right. I mean, concerning is the easiest way of putting it. I mean, it could be very concerning if we don't get the stadium figured out. Mountain West starts changing things up. I mean, we've done really well, Jordan, these last 3 to 4 months in showing how much progress and how much light is at the end of the tunnel for Hawaii athletics. But if we don't get some of these big time infrastructure things figured out right now, and with what could potentially happen in the Mountain West, it could get dismal fast again for Hawaii. But I'd rather keep it glass half full if you're on the same page with me.
Yeah, no, I think that's the better way to kind of approach things. Try to keep the faith, try to keep some of the optimism. It's kind of, we got.
I'll be good cop. I'll always be good cop. Okay.
Yeah.
If you need to be bad cop, that's fine.
No, and I'd much rather be optimistic about this, right? And we got a few different comments both on Facebook and YouTube.
Yeah.
Nolan was asking about the stadium situation, right? What asked our thoughts on, just go back to Old Stadium Park or somewhere near UH West Oahu, out on the other side, right? That's been something that's been brought up in the past. Or just trying to keep the bones of Aloha Stadium and renovating and just figure something out. And I wish we had a better answer for listeners like Nolan, right? It's like any of those, whatever the best option is, and I don't know, right? You can look at it from an accessibility standpoint, revenue, how easy is it for people to get in and out of these games, whether it's on campus, whether it's in Halava, whether it's out near UH West Oahu, how that all works. I don't know. But any of those options are years off. That's the thing, right? No matter which option you choose or which option you think is the best, even if it's just expanding chain, it's still years away from it being 35,000 seats, built out game day atmosphere, that could be on par at least with 35,000 seat Washington State or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had Lewis on YouTube asking some similar comments, right, about the conference moves. Our guy from Al from VA was on our YouTube, right? He's calling on the Senators that had the special session to grill UH leadership when Todd Graham's coaching tenure was under fire, and I don't think I necessarily disagree with Al, right? It's like, hey, there was a lot of interest and a lot of opinionating about the program back then when it came to some of those Senate committees, and some things came about it, but now that Hawaii is in a very tenuous situation, you'd see some of these policymakers and those who carry the purse strings to kind of get fired up again because we need them to. And so I don't think Al from VA is off point at all here, when he's talking about it, because it's the only way that Hawaii finds its way up the ladder, or even probably staying on the same rung in the ladder without falling down, quite a bit, is investment. Like, that's the only way. Got to be, right. Last week we were gushing about these 3 kids from Bishop Gorman who are coming to the University of Hawaii, who offer their commitment. One of them's an Under Armour All-American. Getting excited about Hawaii, some of their comments. But would you blame any of these recruits who maybe pause now? It's like, okay, well, I don't know where dominoes are going to fall, right? I don't know where the cards are going to land, because what's it going to look like? These guys are 2023 recruits, so they're not even going to be in college until next fall.
Yep.
And by then, again, right, all these schools are moving in 2024. Conference realignment, the playoff, how this all looks. It's hard now. The job is infinitely more hard for these coaches at the University of Hawaii to sell the program, because another aspect of that, right, is, hey, look, come play at the University of Hawaii. This year, we're playing an SEC school at home.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt, right? We're going to Michigan. We're going to play in the Big House.
Yeah.
What a great opportunity that is.
Big time.
Next year, we're going to Nashville. We're going to take you guys to Nashville. We're going to play at Vanderbilt. Stanford's coming to town.
Mm-hmm.
2023, they go to Eugene. They play Oregon.
Yeah.
Right? 2024, Oregon and UCLA in back-to-back weeks are supposed to come to Hawaii.
Yeah.
In the first 2 weeks of August, 2024. 2025, Stanford at Arizona on the schedule. 2026 at Stanford, at Arizona State. 2027 home game against UCLA. 2028 road game at UCLA. 2029 home game against Arizona. 2030 at Stanford. 2031 at Oregon. It's kind of ridiculous that these games get scheduled so far out because so much can change. But it's a selling point to recruits, right?
Big time.
Every game from 2024 on could be gone, right? If you're creating these 16, 18, 20, 24 team conferences, those are more conference games. You're not going to go schedule lowly Hawaii or lowly Boise State or something like that to fill out your schedule, because now all of a sudden you're playing 10 conference games, 12 conference games. I don't know, right? If you're in that big of a conference, why would you go play elsewhere? Keep the money in-house, right?
Yeah.
More difficult schedule, no doubt about it, but that's kind of what they're setting up. And so if they're going to get oodles of money, they can buy their way out of these contracts. They can pay $1 million or whatever it is to cancel these games down the road. There's probably some clauses in here. I don't know what the contract language is, but they can maybe get their way out if, conference changes or something like that, right? There's all these things written in there. And so all of these games against Power 5 opponents and outside of Vanderbilt, all of them against Pac-12 opponents. That's the schedule for Hawaii coming up, right? And then you got your FCS schools, Duquesne, Albany, Portland State on the horizon. Some other schools coming up, right? We mentioned Sam Houston signing a home and home with them a few years down the line. Those are selling points for these programs. Look, we're going to play a good schedule. We're going to play competitive games in conference, but we're also going to go play in Pac-12 backyards. We're going to go play in Michigan. We're going to go play in Nashville, Ann Arbor, SEC country. I don't know if any of that exists down the road, right? And if you're a recruit, you got to at least wait and see. I'm not saying don't come to Hawaii. I think it's still an awesome opportunity. You're going to be put in great situations for this coaching staff, but the job is just that much harder now with all of this unknown. And so beyond the hypothesizing of where schools are going to end up, what conferences are going to look like, the tangible aspect of this is the upcoming schedule. All of these games that were signed on for future years in doubt now. It's all in doubt. Who knows what it's going to look like, especially for UCLA, right? Hawaii's scheduled to play them 4 times over the next 8 years.
Yeah.
That's a Big Ten school now,
So wild.
well, maybe not now, but in 2 years, there'll be a Big Ten school. So yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea what these games are going to look like. I have no idea what schedules are going to look like. Are these schools even going to want to play non-Power 5 opponents or Power 2 opponents or whatever down the road? I don't know. Hard to say.
I know. And, I think what happened, I think this is a nice little transition for us, Jordan, with what happened with Mason Muaau, the receiver from St. Louis. I think we're going to continue to see a little bit of that. Just that's kind of in the water with the new college football recruit and just that generation where, I'd like to take this platform for those listening, whether you're a father, an uncle, an auntie, and you've got the ability to speak into, in our case, young men's life, making decisions. I'm a big believer, let your yes be yes and your no be no. With those guys that are still playing at Bishop Gorman over in Vegas, they've got a whole nother year in front of them. I think you brought up a great point, Jordan. There is no rush in making a decision. I know it can kind of feel like it is. There's all this pressure. Take a deep breath, enjoy your last year of high school, and really think about all of this, because it's kind of a bummer, man, when you say you're going to come to play for Hawaii and then not a month later, no, I'm going to Colorado State. It's kind of like, come on, bro. Like, all right, I know you got to make the decision that's best for you, but be about that action, man. Like, let your yes be yes, your no be no. That I just wanted to kind of sound off on that for a second, Jordan.
Yeah, it's kind of an uneasy process, right? And sometimes, kids are, I think, pressured, not saying, in the case of Mason Muaau, but maybe feel pressured to offer up a commitment because you want to take what you can get early on, right? And say it's a school that was first to the table. And all of a sudden, that draws in the attention of other schools that come in that offer you a package that makes more sense for you or your family. Now you've kind of painted yourself in an awkward position, right? And it's tough for these young guys how to navigate those waters, I think, and trying to figure out how best to play the recruiting process when, especially for some of these guys that don't have everybody coming and knocking on their door, right? You don't know if that first offer is going to be the only one. You don't want it to go away at some point. And so, yeah, it's uneasy, right? Because even for some of these coaching staffs, right, they can make you the verbal offer and say, hey, we'd like to offer you a scholarship. And again, this isn't a veiled comment on the University of Hawaii or Muaau or anything like that. This is just kind of the way the game works, right? But if some of your higher desired recruits and all of a sudden you don't have scholarships, well, then you got to pull it, right? And then so it's an icky situation. And so kind of bringing it back home, right? The Mason Muaau, the wide receiver from St. Louis, who was one of the three kids, along with Josiah Timoteo and John Chiave Sangapolutele Timoteo, the offensive lineman from Waianae, Sangapolutele, over the same weekend, not that long ago, I think it was basically a month ago, that offered their commitment to the University of Hawaii, verbal commitment. Yeah. But Mason Muaau just recently on Twitter, saying that he's going with Colorado State now. It's kind of interesting because that's where some of the Hawaii staff came from, right? With Timmy Chang. And I know they weren't there very long, obviously, with Jay Norvell before Timmy got the Hawaii job. So that's kind of interesting. That'll make for some interesting recruiting road banter, I think, for those coaching staffs, no doubt about it. And for these guys, and I hope it works out for Mason wherever he decides to end up. I'm going to guess that, even the Hawaii coaches, they're not going to give up necessarily on the recruitment just yet, right? They'll be at St. Louis games. They'll be at St. Louis practices. There's opportunity for these guys to change their mind. But it's one of those things like, man, it's how strong is a verbal commitment. It's often pretty flimsy, just the way that things go, right? And even these guys that are 16, 17 years old, right? They'll change their mind a few times throughout the process. They'll mature differently, right? They'll value different things and prioritize different things that maybe didn't make sense when they offered up an initial commitment. So we'll see what happens with Muaau and where he ultimately ends up, whether it's at Colorado State, whether he decides to stick home or whatnot. And maybe it's
tell the girl you love her until you really know you love her. Okay.
Always a good, I think, philosophy to live by there.
Yeah.
And you've seen it, right? Even some of these other kids, they'll go away. They'll give it an opportunity. They'll give it a shot at some of these mainland opportunities, and then sometimes they end up back home anyway, down the road. And so you never want to kind of slam the door shut on anything like that. Speaking of commitments, Francis Mauigoa, the young man from American Samoa, plays now high school football at IMG in Bradenton, Florida. Number 1 offensive tackle in the country, number 5 recruit. Made his commitment. I think it was on the 4th of July, either then or Monday on national television, CBS Sports Network. And there it was. He had the hats out. Miami, Alabama, SC, Oregon, Hawaii. There was the H on the table, which is still just mind blowing. You see the picture, watch the clip and whatnot. It's like that it was on the table. It was on the table. He did not commit to Hawaii. Had he committed to Hawaii, that would have led the pod. Even with all the other news, he committed to Miami. Built a relationship with Mario Cristobal when he was over at Oregon. Cristobal now at Miami. It's close to where his family now resides in Florida, at least his immediate family. It made all the sense in the world. But again, the fact that Hawaii was on the table. What percentage? Probably pretty slim. But of all the schools in the country, they were one of the 6 that had their hat on the table, which is kind of a big deal. Again, and
those we can compete.
And that's the thing. It's like, man, with the current landscape, and I get it. That's like saying, the weather in the Midwest sometimes it can change in the blink of an eye. But with the current landscape, Hawaii, what the coaching staff has done, I think they've carved out a nice little niche, got the attention at the very least of some of these recruits, especially some of these recruits of Polynesian descent. Right. Yeah. And you think you're playing right by one set of rules, right? The pieces on the game board are one way. And now with the massive news of USC and UCLA, that game board looks completely different. And how they navigate that is going to be, kind of the viability of the program going forward. So yeah, no Francis Mauigoa coming, but hey, maybe it doesn't work out at Miami. And he's like, maybe transfer portal time. We can only hope. Now, I hope it works out for him. He's a guy that's like projected to be a first round draft pick. Yeah, like he's the real deal. So we'll see how it works out there for him. But some mixed bag, I guess, recruiting news for Hawaii. I don't think anybody realistically thought we'd get Mauigoa, but if indeed Mason Muaau is switching his commitment, that bit of a bummer, I think, for Hawaii football fans. But again, still early. These guys have a ton of time before they could sign in December. And how their season, he could blow up. He could be, on his way to USC by the time his career is done or something like that. So it could change all over the place. But some of the recruiting news there. One other tidbit here as we kind of near the end of the episode. Brian Smith, former University of Hawaii co-offensive coordinator, former center. Obviously went up with Nick Rolovich to Washington State. He has been named the pass game coordinator for Ohio University. That's the Bobcats down in Athens. Frank Solich no longer the coach there. Different regime. It is a much different look there, but in the MAC. So good for Schmitty. Nice landing spot there for him after trying to find a home following all that unraveled at Washington State. So a couple of tidbits there on the recruiting trail, as well as some Hawaii alums.
Yeah. Oh, big time. And all the best to Coach Schmitty over at Ohio. Much different than sunny Hawaii. I can tell you that much right now. But former coach of mine, all the best to him. And it's new landscape, Jordan. Landscapes left and right with college football.
It could change by the time we record next week's episode. It could change by the time we release this episode. Who knows? Let's hope not, because then we don't want to.
Circus commences again.
Oh man, and it is. It just bummed me out last week. It really did. Getting the news, it's like, wow, you get over the initial shock of it all. I really thought it was like a fake tweet that everybody was reacting to. One of those fake accounts. It's like, it's not Stephen A. Smith, but it's like Stephen A. Smith with a V instead of a PH. And they're like, oh my God, he said this. It's like, that's a fake account. Wasn't a fake account. And the seismic ramifications of all of this that just are going to reverberate all the way down to all levels of college sports. Looks kind of bleak for some, uncertain for others. Like a lot of the conversations we're having for the University of Hawaii, like Oregon is having, because they don't know where they're going yet either. Washington, look, they're in much better shape, obviously, to find a home. I get that. But there are, it's as uncertain for some of those other programs as well. This isn't just Hawaii, a Boise State, a San Diego State, same thing. Like, they maybe are better positioned than Hawaii to find an emergency hatch, but a lot of these same conversations going on at higher levels of collegiate athletics than just the University of Hawaii. So, I don't know. Any final thoughts, Hunter, before we kind of wrap this thing up and head on with the rest of the week?
Yeah, just really quick. When you think about the Big 12 and the Pac, I like to think about bargaining chips. And at least for the Pac-12, the biggest one besides Oregon, in my opinion, was USC, was the draw of LA, everything they bring. Will Ferrell's at all their practices, Snoop Dogg's right there too. I mean, it's one of the biggest marketing pieces of the Pac-12. And then you look over at the Big 12, in terms of dominance, Oklahoma and Texas owned the Big 12 in terms of football, really, for other than the past couple of years with Baylor making an appearance and little things like that. It's been owned by those schools. And so you kind of have two conferences without kings now, where I don't know, it almost seems logical that they could form the next big super conference and there'd be three. It's kind of just what I see as logical right now. And again, I don't know what that looks like, or if that's even going to happen. But man, we'll, for all those listening at home, we will be the first ones to talk about conference shifting, because obviously Jordan and I can talk for hours on end.
Yeah, we could go for a while, and I'm sure we'll have more to talk about next week as well. Yeah, it's and just one last thing on that. It's funny because you talk about them being kind of kings of their conferences. I would agree. They are now kind of giving that up. Like they're going into somebody else's kingdom
big time.
And I don't think they're necessarily going to be top dog right away, especially in the SEC. with those two. USC football wise can be really interesting to see how they fit into the Big Ten. UCLA, they're there because they're in Los Angeles, but that'll kind of be there. Just on the overtime, just wanted to give a big mahalo to some of the folks that I've heard from that listen to the pod. Some of the folks that commented, Nolan, Leonard, the Champ Show, just offering a little
Dr. Suyama,
offering a little aloha. So we appreciate you all. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Kind of rambled a bit on this episode. There are so many things that kind of flooded the mind and wanted to get to organize some of those thoughts, but I'm sure we'll think of some other things when it comes to conference realignment that we'll get to next week. Who knows what the future will hold, but we do know Vanderbilt's still coming this year. At least we are hopeful of that, to get the season started in less than nearing 50 days now, up until August. That's next month. Hawaii takes the field, so it's going to be a really, really interesting landscape. Hunter, always appreciate you, my man. Always fun talking story. We could rap for hours, but then that would just mean more work for Jaron.
That's right,
our producer. So we're not going to do that to him. We'll save some of those conversations for next week as well. All right, that'll do it for us here on episode 45 of Hawaii Football Now, presented by Xanthison. Shout out as well to Spectrum Mobile and Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union. Feel free to drop us a line on any of our platforms, and we'll see you next week, everybody. Aloha.
You've been listening to Hawaii Football Now with Jordan Helly and Hunter Hughes, all from ESPN Honolulu.